Thank you, everyone. As we are preparing to start the live now, we have at this portion of the service, or the program, sorry, why does it matter? Community justice. And I'd like to introduce the panelists at this time. Helen Zimba, if you'll raise your hand. International HIV and reproductive justice leader. Helen's professional background encompasses both business management, and she has served as a grant reviewer for HRSA, SAMSHA, and the NIH over the past 20 years. She's also been a board member and trainer for AIDS Alliance. Thank you for joining us, Helen. Ms. Trimble, June Trimble, if you'll raise your hand, thank you. She is currently the Senior Program Coordinator, Manager of State-Funded Prevention Contracts, and provides daily management of the operation and services provided through the community collaborations with local agencies. Thank you, Ms. June. Mr. Chris Walker. Chris is a highly motivated public health professional with a passion for ending the HIV epidemic. With expertise in community engagement and program development, as well as capacity building, Chris has a proven track record of success in bridging the gap between research and real-world impact, and serves as the project manager and public health consultant, leading initiatives to improve access to care and reduce HIV transmission. Ms. Cabrillo Regional is, yeah, she's right there. Ms. Cabrillo is a public health professional with over 5 years of HIV prevention. With 4 of those 5 years, she's focused on disparities in southern United States communities. She is an expert in community health education and outreach, and content strategy with project management experience. Let's thank the panelists, please, for joining us today. So it was important for us to involve community organizations in this program today. We're looking at things from multiple directions. Earlier you heard the medical. Right now you're going to hear community, and later on you're going to hear from a church. So you get to ask questions, hear different aspects of what's going on for the Black faith communities and HIV. I'd like to start off with this panel with just a couple of questions. What are the current advocacy efforts to improve access to HIV care and treatment?
Thank you for that. I think that first thing, we have to reduce stigma, because if we can't reduce stigma, we can't even go anywhere. And also to address other issues other than just HIV in order for us to get to HIV, because if we just focus on HIV, probably won't go anywhere, because people do have other issues going on in order to get to where we need to be.
Hello, everyone. I have a few. So I know at the Texas legislature, the bill SB 50 is currently sitting at its second reading in the House. It's championed by Vinton Jones. He is the whip for his political party. And he, basically the bill standardizes having the HIV test included in an STD panel. And in order to opt out, you have to sign a consent and agree And that's really important just to make sure that individuals know their status. I know that Parkland Health here in Dallas follows a similar model in their ER system, and that has helped to make sure that people are aware of their status and that they get treatment before they are discharged. Additionally, there are advocacy days happening at the Capitol. If you have the time and the willingness, I would say get involved with organizations. I went a couple weeks ago with Positive Women's Network, and individuals that were living with HIV championed and led that day. And we were able to talk to our state representatives from all over Texas. So I believe that's extremely important. Also, to speak for leadership within like the Ryan White Care Networks, et cetera. I know that there is an emphasis on getting back to patient-centered care. I'll say that again, because in public health, we want our numbers, but it's really going to be as things come down the pipeline that we have to really pay attention to those social determinants of health and fill those gaps where our patients need it. And so, and my last point as well, there is a community centered thing that is at the county, and that's called the Ryan White Planning Council. If you all are not familiar with it, folks living with HIV champion that council. I know that there's an approval process through the county judge right now, but the easiest way for you to connect with the different subgroups of that advisory council or the planning council is to get involved with the committees. There are several committees. They're all included on the application, and I can send that link out, and I can provide a few copies as well. Get involved in the committees. That's where we go out to the community and we assess the needs of those priority populations. And that is a place where you can advocate. I sit on those calls all the time and I hear folks' voices, right? And so if you want to be heard, I definitely suggest that you advocate for communities that are not being heard on those committees as well.
Thank you.
I think, is this thing on? Is it recording? Okay. There we go. You know, can y'all hear me? All right. So,
I know you need the mic.
I'm sorry, we got people in virtual land. All right. So I think that when first in talking about what advocacy looks like, we have to define advocacy, because many people think that advocacy is one thing, when advocacy is actually like a multidisciplinary approach to create space and using your privilege for other people who don't have the access, the connection, or the privilege that you don't have. And so when I think about what advocacy looks like in the DFW, literally advocacy is everything. Advocacy is what you guys are doing by being in the audience. Advocacy is what you're doing by tuning in virtually. Advocacy is about spreading awareness, knowledge, and really discontinuing toxic, negative awareness and notions around HIV within our community. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that advocacy looks different for so many different people. Everybody's not going to be a person that can go to Capitol Hill and protest, because that might not work within my lifestyle. Advocacy can be something as simple as reposting something on social media, saying, hey, baby, look, don't say that. Or, hey, you're wrong. Instead of calling somebody out, calling somebody in. Advocacy can be holding someone accountable. Advocacy can be inviting someone who is not in this space to the next event that the gathering has, you know. And I think that when we talk about advocacy, first, we have to explain and really define what that looks like and meet people where they are in their advocacy journeys, right? We can acknowledge that all of us, we are here speaking to you all through our own personal experience, but that's our form of advocacy, but that might not be the advocacy that folk choose to employ each and every day. So before we talk about what advocacy is being done here in DFW, we first have to address what advocacy is and what that looks like and what it can be. Because I think that we missed the mark without figuring out what new forms of new ways of advocacy is. These settings are great, right? But as you look around the room, these are people that I worked with, that have saw me on my public health journey, that I've collaborated with, and we sit here and talk about the same things in the same way that we already know. Advocacy is figuring out how can we be innovative to take what we know, what we understand, and reach those folk who need this information, who have yet had the privilege to be in these spaces. Advocacy is what we're doing on social media via the live and recording. How can we reach people where they are so they can know what they need to do to galvanize a change, so they can be aware of what's going on in society, so we can make sure that we all gonna be good.
And I just want to piggyback on what Chris said, because advocacy also, depending on the organization who you're with, you have some limitations, like mine. And so, because I can't lobby or advocate, but I do support and attend, the Ryan White Planning Council, the HIV Task Force, the Fast Track. That's how we get our involvement and support it. And we also have a CAB which is a Consumer Advisory Board, that we reach out to empower them to speak up. And so it looks different. It is different, but we have the same goal in mind. And I think when you're talking about advocacy efforts, it is making the community more involved. One of my true passions is getting community buy-in. We got to get people that are not at this table more involved in supporting these efforts. And I think we only can do that by true collaboration. Not just collaboration we throw that word around loosely, but true collaborating and involving people that are not in this business of HIV. I always say, if the breast cancer can get men wearing pink on the football field, we ought to be able to get them to wear red. So I'm just saying that's a true collaboration, and how can we do that better?
So my next question that I wanted to present to you is, how can we as a community improve access to HIV care?
So I think for me, and so it's a phrase that an old boss would tell me all the time. He said, Chris, it's more than just about being present. You have to have presence in being present. And so when we come into HIV spaces like this and HIV ally spaces, we have to figure out how can we do more than just show up as us being advocates, as us being experts, but how can we have a true presence in this space, but also encourage other folk to have presence in this space. I think another part about that is that improving access is about what Cabria has talked about, is holding people accountable, right? So making sure we know how systems impact the access to care that people have or lack thereof. I was saying earlier, I was like, I didn't even know people was going to be in here voting. That's how we improve healthcare access, because everything in the world of public health, everything in the world of health in general is ran by policy. Without policy, there's no funding. Without funding, there's no opportunity. Without any opportunity, we don't know how to appropriately and effectively service folk. And so at its core basis is about understanding the systems and having presence and being present and showing up, but also knowing how to disseminate the information about what's important and getting community involved in that. We talk oftentimes, this is what's going on, this is what's happening, but we only know because it directly impacts our jobs, or we only know because we're already in this space. But what does that look like to really bridge that gap between those folk who don't know, to improve the access that they have, and to encourage and empower them to do the same, to where it creates a domino effect, to where not only are we leveraging what we know and experience as it relates to access to care, but also we're informing and teaching people who are impacted by HIV and who have the potential to be impacted by HIV, and they are aware of the resources that they can access, and then they can spread it on.
Hello? Yeah, I would also like to add, as a community, we can improve access by getting our boots back on the ground. All right? So I know we love that song, Clank, 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 but really it's going to come down to us going and touching our neighbor and saying, hey, have you gotten tested? Do you know what resources are available? Can you tell somebody about the resources available, right?
Where your test at?
Where your test at?
Where your test at?
Okay, so really, it's gonna go back to us being for us, right? So if you care about that person, you're gonna have to tell them the information. You're gonna have to find out the information and tell them and encourage them to pass it along as well. Also, improving access to HIV care. I don't know what position y'all are in y'all's roles within the HIV field, but it's gonna take us internally at these different organizations telling our superiors, hey, put it any way you can without, losing, without causing too much of a ruckus. Now, it might cause a ruckus depending on how they take it, but I'm saying we have to advocate for our patients. A great example of that, if you see that there's a need and there's a population that we need to be serving, how can they access our services? If they can't physically make it here, how do we collaborate with organizations that go out within the community to deliver an at-home test, to take them to a food bank? Do we use our transportation as nonprofit agencies to take this group of people that maybe are HIV positive to their care and wellness? Are there virtual services that they can use and still access Ryan White dollars and still access their ACA? We need to educate ourselves on all of the avenues possible while we still have them and make sure that we employ them. And yeah, that's how we will improve access, at least for now. We need to be highly, highly, highly educated on the services that are available. I know that there's a lot of turnover within this field. That starts with also making a policy within your organization saying that we're going to train these new hires on XYZ policy, and this is how it ties back into your full-time role. If there is a touch point anywhere somebody accesses a person that may be at risk for HIV, STIs, sexual trauma, anything, we all need to gather together, create a master list of resources, something to where if somebody is down and out at 12 o'clock at night, 2 o'clock in the morning, I know that I can go here and I can have this information in the morning when everything opens at 8 o'clock. I know this information so well that I can pass it on to someone else. That is really going to be the improvement in access. I know that we are struggling with viral suppression rates within the county as well. We need to make sure to encourage people to stay in care and to make sure that, HIV is primary care. HIV is health care. Mental health is primary care. Mental health is health care. All of these social determinants of health, we need to make sure to continue to go through every avenue possible. And I'm going to be quiet at that one.
Yes, I think, we always talk about meeting people where they are, but sometimes we misinterpret that because we might say, I want to meet people where they are and take them some information and just give it to them. For some people, meeting people where they are is taking it to them and say, here it is. But sometimes that's not what it is. We can translate this stuff because most of our materials, what I've noticed is that the materials we have for HIV, they are more for medical people. So if we can translate it to where people can understand, to me, that's part of meeting people where they are. Translating the same information into a language where a person can understand it. And also, I think one way we can also eliminate a lot of these things is by collaborating with a lot of organizations here. We are doing the same things for the same people, so we end up just being all over the place and not, providing. When we all can, if we do it together, we can even do better by collaborating. By that I mean that I know when people are newly diagnosed, they don't want to go to 6, 7 places to get a service. So if we can have one-stop shop, somehow. It doesn't mean that everything has to be provided there, but it means that we all can be there for the person. We used to do it a long time ago. I just wish we could. Yeah, we could go back there. Because if somebody comes in, now they have childcare issues because they can't see their OB because their child is sitting right there. Why can't we have that accessible at that time? They need to go get their birth certificate. Somebody can sign them up right there. So it just means being in the same space at the same time somehow. That would be an ideal. So.
To add to what Ms. Helen is talking about too, in terms of access, being willing to collaborate with other organizations that are within your own backyard. So when I think about how clients frequent service, they may come to me because they may need housing, but they may come to you because they feel more comfortable with the mental health support and services that you have. And so what does that look like for us to be able to share clients? Also, what does that look like for us to be able to mitigate the trauma associated with them having to fill out several applications and go in and meet new people and having to streamline the case management process? So on an organizational perspective, really knowing what organizations are doing what and coming up with some policies and procedures that you all can utilize so we can be able to share clients instead of competing for services and competing for people's attention to where, hey, look, baby, this is one general application that we're going to put all your needs, and this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to handle, and then we're going to meet about how we're going to take care for this person in a true patient-centered medical home approach, because that's what we need. Because when we talk about HIV is so much more than sex. It's where you live, where you work, where you play, where you worship, who you worship, how you worship, if you got a car, if you don't, if you stay in South Dallas, North Dallas, Oakland, all of that. So as we service people, we have to take into account of a whole person's perspective and a whole person approach and how we service them as providers. And what that looks like is that looks like acknowledging that, hey, look, they might want to come here for this, but we may not be the all and end all. But guess what I can do is that I can connect you to somebody who got what I don't have, or the program that they have may be a better fit for you, and it's okay. And we can share you and we can work together to make sure you got what you need. Right.
Sometimes it's because of the funding that we all get. Some funding might say you can't talk about God. You just doing case management, you can't talk about God. But you know that that person can use some prayers. So instead of just you shutting them down, you know that they can come here because we can talk about it. So I work for the Affairs Center. We're not funded like that, so we are more flexible on what we can say. Some words that I can't say them in here because we're into church, but those are things that, those are real things that, people need to hear sometimes. And according to funding, maybe your organization might not let you do that. Might not let you address those things, but you do know that another organization can do that. So, but for you to be able to send the person there, we have to work together. So.
Alrighty, so I don't even know if I should be asking this question on a recorded line, but I'm gonna take it there anyway. So, I am all for us collaborating amongst organizations and doing all of those things. However, and I don't want to say we're the bottom feeders because I don't think that about us at all. But we can want these things and have these conversations because we know they're needed. We know what the community needs because we're the people actually in the community. But do our bosses in the organizations that we work for want to share patients? Because when you share patients, you're sharing money, right? So how do we maneuver and make these things happen within the constraints of our organizations? Because at the end of the day, we know what our community needs, but are they hearing us? Because we can keep talking amongst each other all day and keep kumbayaing, but is it going to happen? Or do we need to do our own thing to make it happen? Because are we working within systems that aren't designed for us, like everything else in America? I don't want this to be another conversation where we beating a dead horse, but we walking away with the same results. What are we going to do to make sure that our people get what they need? Because like I said earlier, I can only speak for me and the people in these rooms. I can't speak for nobody outside of these walls and what they want from my community, because time and time again, people have shown their true colors. So with that information, what we gonna do? So I'm first statement.
I want to respond first because I'm prevention only. So, so we do refer. We test. We don't treat. We test and we refer out to all those that test positive to you guys, to PRISM, to the HF, to Bounty Prosperity, because we don't do any treatment. And so I think the only thing that I think that needs improvement is the handoff. Is making sure we're handing off to a person, a direct person for the client. So the client can feel comfortable in saying, okay, I'm gonna call XYZ and help you make the appointment. When you get there, this is who you need to ask for, versus going to a system and you not knowing anybody in that agency. So from the prevention side, we collaborate with everybody in here. We have a list of people. When we test a client tests positive, we give them options. Here's ABC, which one you feel comfortable going with, or we know somebody, this is close enough to your home, or who has an available appointment. So that, on that perspective, I agree with you. I mean, I can't speak to about whether the higher ups know, sharing patients, because I do think, we do need to do a better job on my end anyway, on the knowing, because there has been a lot of turnover, on knowing now who's in each agency so we can have an appropriate handoff for the client.
I would say that the patients need to be educated on their rights. So within the system, patients have the right to go wherever they want to go for their care. And there's a thing called self-referral that maybe organizations don't want to educate their patients about. So I know for Dallas County, we are working on a project to make eligibility be centralized. That means that a patient can go to any organization, as long as there's not a duplication of services, to receive their services. And we're going to make sure that that education is pushed out to the patients as well. Because they can self-refer, they can go to any organization and get a referral for certain services. So let's say they go to an organization called Legal Hospice for legal services, and then they also mention that, oh, well, I haven't had my medication in XYZ months. They can refer to one of the community organizations that provide medical care, and that community organization should be responsible for making sure that that patient has what they need. Now, if that patient wants to go somewhere else, they can go to the other organization and say, hey, I want to transfer my care, and they have the right to. I want to emphasize, they have the right to. There shouldn't be any intimidation about you losing a patient or you losing your dollars, essentially. Because at the end of the day, if that patient's care is not handled in the right way, you're probably going to lose that patient to care. And what does that do? Lose your dollars in the first place. So I think it's reiterating that the community organizations need to do their due diligence to make sure that person is taken care of and that their needs are met. And I know the higher ups are making an effort, at least, to make that be very apparent to the organizations that we fund. Now, things are slow because it's government, but I would also say that you all at the community organizations, y'all can come in and send an email and check in on some of the projects that we said that we have been working on. Actually, that pressure might be good for us to speed things along. If we hear that there's a call from the community, it's our job to also answer it. So I think that's definitely a way that we can make sure that we are shifting towards doing the right thing by patients. And I mean, people, become newly diagnosed every day. We know that. The money is going to be there. allegedly.
I just want to chime in a little bit regarding, I don't know if my mic is on or not. Thank you. I just want to chime in a little bit because there is a thing called HIPAA, and we do have to be conscientious of sharing information as a result of HIPAA. So there is a process to making that happen. But the other thing I just wanted to add in terms of access, you all coming to events like this when there's a call is much appreciated because it does inform the community via our website, our live streaming, that can make a difference and let people know that these types of services exist. Your community names, your organization names will be out there, and things of that nature. So I just wanted to share that.
I'm gonna give you the less political response to what you were saying. So I ain't from Texas, I'm from Memphis, and I'm very nuck if you buck, okay? And so when it comes down to the people that I serve each and every day, I'm here to service them. They don't work for me, I work for them. And if they tell me they need something and I feel like they're going to better access it somewhere else, I'm gonna give them that resource. I don't make money or lose money by sharing our resources because I'm here to work for them. And in the term of the scope of my organization, it's impactful to them because it's about building rapport, because I'm developing that relationship that's going to keep them coming in to frequent our service for whatever I'm servicing them. But I'm also a realist and can acknowledge the services that we have may not work for everybody, because when we offer it may not be the time when they're available. They might have a prior history with the person that's doing it, or they just may resonate with someone different. And so sometimes we have to disengage and disrupt systems and nuck if you buck to make sure people have what they need in an effective and an efficient way, and that's okay. I think that, and I've dealt with this a lot as always being like a younger person working in this space and having to navigate through these systems, these hierarchy systems, and navigate through tokenism, and also navigate not being hurt because people didn't think that I knew what I was talking about, and say, hey, look, I don't care what you think, I don't care what you feel, but I know what works for people who look like me and love like me and have those same experiences, and I'm gonna do my hardest to make sure they have what they need, period. And I think, and honestly, it was hard to deal with, but when people saw that it worked, I started to get respected for that. So I tell people, baby, nuck and buck the system within which what you have the capacity to do. And we're here for people. I'm not here for looks. I'm not here for notoriety. I'm here to save lives, okay? And so if saving lives means that I have to give you something that we don't have, or I have to give you something that might compete against what we have, I'm gonna do that because that's saving your life. Do you want to end HIV or not? What you want to do?
Can I ask my question? Okay. My question was for the system that Cabria brought up around the referrals. So don't worry, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I do know that sometimes these systems can be well intended, but there can be a little bit of a issue. So I'm wondering, how is it being evaluated from the client's perspective? Is there a pilot program being put in place to make sure that from the client's perspective that it's actually smooth? Because as our moderator was pointing out, the issue of HIPAA often can create a situation where the client's having to kind of repeat themselves repeatedly, and it can really be really problematic.
As far as HIPAA goes and like global consent. But I do want to say that there is a global consent form that patients sign to say that they are okay with sharing their information with other organizations. Now, I know when it comes to organizations that are not necessarily funded by us, that would have to be, following the HIPAA standards, and there would be a sharing relationship, ideally already through the organizations. But Alma, you want to answer?
Hello. Okay, yes, the answer to that question is we have a team of linkage to care personnel, and they talk to their patients, and they ask the question of what you need, where do you live, what is good for you, and then they go from there. In fact, they go as far as, I know somebody was mentioning, if they need to go to the pharmacy, take them to the pharmacy. They will go with them to their appointments to make sure that if you're talking to them and they don't understand, but they're too embarrassed to ask, the person, the linkage person, will sit there and say, "Did you understand that?" And then may whisper over there, and then the linkage person will say, "No, she did not understand that. Let's go over it again." So they go with them to make sure. If they don't like that place, then we will switch that place to where they want to go, so they don't have to stay there. But we have like 5 or 6 linkage to care people, and they take patients every day to their appointment. They sit with them. Sometimes it's an all-day process that they have to sit with them, but they sit with them and make sure that every question is answered, every need is met. And then they still keep in communication, because we contact them like every 30 days, then every 3 months, and then at 6 months. Yes, that's ending the HIV epidemic with the HE. And that program has been going on for at least,
So
maybe, I don't know.
yeah, so something that I'm referring to is within one of our systems over on the Ryan White side. So the pilot of it is still, we're still planning it. It's not going to be accessible to consumers yet. We're rolling it out to our subrecipients first, so they know how to operate the system. But within the Ryan White space, there is a self-referral process. I think there's a need to maybe reiterate that process, but each subrecipient should know the process. And so, as I was saying, if a patient was to go to a certain organization and say they need XYZ services or they want to be transferred, there should be a warm handoff. Hot potato. So that's why it's so important to build those relationships as well, because if I have Chris's number. If I need something for a patient, I can call Chris and say, "Hey, this patient needs XYZ." And I think that's really important for, even though I know there's a lot of turnover in this space, but we have to get acquainted with what is offered within the medical community. And a lot of people want to stay in their silos, but there needs to be a breakdown of that. If only one person in the organization is doing it, that they can be a resource. Somebody needs to have a training about, this is where you go to get this. Here's the information that's laid out. These people have websites. Go to the website, make a hot sheet for your organization. I know that's something that I am trying to do. I know that there is information available on the Ryan White website. Is it difficult to navigate? Yes, but all of our organizations are listed somewhere.
Thank you. I got one last question before we do our lunch break. Does your organization, and I'd like for each one of you to speak, have a faith component for churches to be partners in this work?
I can start. The organization I work with, the Affairs Center, we do have a faith-based component to it. We work with a church right next door. So we had a good way of introducing the church to the community, because what we heard from the planning council over the years is that that's what's missing. A lot of people, that was their barrier. They said, "I don't want to go to church because that's where I got hurt," because they didn't want to talk about HIV. They looked at me like I did something wrong. So people were disconnected. So what we did, we had our first meeting with the church, with the HIV task force, and invited other churches and other organizations in the HIV community. So it was well attended. And from there, we've been doing a lot of trainings with the church. So everything that we do, the church is included because we serve the same people. Because with us being in the community as well, that has worked. So we are having to do voter engagement, which the church is involved, HIV, the church is involved, and now we're doing food distribution, the church is involved as well. So everything that we are doing, the church is part of it.
And I want to say we don't have a specific faith component, but again, we provide HIV testing across Dallas County, HIV and STI testing. So we have, over the years, we've been around for 30 years, have without hesitation supported churches who wants to incorporate testing. I am a member of a very progressive church, and they actually have a Hope ministry, which it was the HIV/AIDS ministry, and I'm often there assisting them on third Sundays if they want to have HIV testing. I just recently did an educational course with the youth there about a month ago, so that's my church, but we have partnered with other churches across Dallas County where we do provide testing and education as well, and it's never been an issue for us. The only issue we have as a testing agent is offering testing, to the community that's not of the target population that we're funded to do. So that puts that, sometimes it kind of prevent us from doing it, because while we do want to do the education and provide testing across the board, our funding is targeted. And so, I'm always, do like to give churches priority, but I do have to start asking who are the targets and who's going to be in attendance, because we do have some objectives, performance objectives that we try to meet. So yes, it's not a component, but it is a group in an area, in a venue, in an organization that we do like to partner with. I also want to just comment on this before I miss it, is on the last panel, they talked about barbershops and salons. We also, prior to COVID, in 2015, we started a fade out of HIV with barbers and stylists that we partnered with the city of Dallas with, and the local barbers and stylists. One of the biggest things that we did was educate the barbers and stylists, because what the problem was we go to the barbershop, we go to the salons, everybody's talking about sex, but you're not giving the right information. So we had to take the time and stop the train of testing and educate the barbers and stylists, so when we're not there, they are giving them the right information. So we're trying to get that back on board. We probably be reaching out to a lot of you guys to help us to get that back going post-COVID, because a lot of the shops have closed. And so now we're trying to reach back out to see what new barbershops and salons have opened up to kind of get that back going. But that was a very, very progressive movement to educate the stylists and the barbers on HIV and AIDS, so that when they are having these conversations, they were giving out the right information.
At my organization, we don't have a direct HIV and faith connection or collaboration, but we do work with a lot of faith-based institutions. So just like UT Southwestern, we do a lot of testing and outreach and engagement at faith-based institutions. We also, the building in which we reside is actually owned by a church, Winners Assembly, and we're closely connected to Cornerstone Baptist Church, which is next door. So we're always in communication with the leaders of those ministries, and they make referrals to us. We even host AA classes and behavioral health classes at the church, because they provide food to those folks impacted by homelessness from the South Dallas community. And I think that it's so integral and ingrained to the work that we do, because just going even beyond direct programming within faith-based institutions. So my current research interest is how post-traumatic slave syndrome impacts the sexual behaviors of Black Americans. And so when we think about slavery and how church was the gateway that led us to our freedom, church can also be the warehouse that leads us to our freedom from HIV. But it's about how can we galvanize a response to connect with folks within faith-based institutions to reroute some of these misconceptions about those folk impacted by HIV and sexual behaviors in general, to one, hold folk accountable for being better, inform folk on how to reach the folk that they're frequenting in their religious institutions, and then encouraging them to move beyond what they have been doing. So I think that it's a twofold approach, and one, like being present within the community and just reaching out, but also if someone calls you, you heed that response and really being innovative in how you connect, but also thinking about how can the connection that you make with faith-based institutions strategically and systemically lead to a systematic change.
So we don't necessarily, or that I know of, I don't know if Ryan White and EHE, we don't necessarily have a faith-based initiative, but there are ways to circumvent that. So for example, there's a beautiful space on the 4th floor of HHS, and you can come and use that space free, depending on I guess the subject matter of what you'd like to talk about for that day, but you can have that space during the day for free. You have to schedule, but that's another way that you can get engaged with us and that we can partner with you all. I know my team is, we'll stop by and talk to the individuals that are having things within that space as well. Another way that you can get involved, or that we can get involved with each other, EHE has a 10-session education and outreach. How much? Big decisions. And each, so they want to diversify their partners. So any church that has youth up to 65 years old that needs education over sexual health, or maybe even the conversations that come with sexual health, that resource is available to you all. And I believe participants get a gift card. They get a gift card, $25. So yes, each session, right? So that's 10 sessions. Well, we won't get into that. But each session, so that's 10 sessions, $25. If that's a motivation, that'll be a motivation. But we are actively open and willing to come in and educate or build partnerships. So I encourage you to get one of our information and see how we can collaborate. There's resources available. Now, it may not be funds, but there's some resources.
And that's another thing. I'm sorry. The resources in Dallas are in the room. We have so many different resources that folk can access and utilize so they can be the best and most authentic version of themselves. It's just that they don't know about it. And so the more that we as advocates, the more that we as experts, the more that we as people with lived experience can come together in spaces like this to connect, get to know each other, and share, the more that we can share to our communities. I encourage you all to join the Ryan White Planning Council, join the HIV Task Force, join the Dallas Health Equity Coalition, join the Dallas Hope Charities, Hope Collective Coalition. All these coalitions and consortiums and consortia of people that are actively doing the work to share these resources, to make a new connection. So in the event that things don't happen in the system, if somebody needs something, you can pick up the phone and be like, hey, Miss Helen, I got somebody who came in, and I know at the Affiliate Center y'all do women's stuff and yoga, and I think that this person would be a great candidate for your program. I'm finna call them, get you on three-way, and I'm finna introduce myself, and then I'm finna get off the line so y'all can talk. It's just that simple. But it starts with us in this room being able to leverage communication, being able to make and forge connections and partnerships, being able to build trust amongst ourselves, and really being able to have presence and being present so we then can give it to the folks that we serve.
Go ahead. Oh, okay. Okay, so I just wanted to close out on the church part because I think that the churches, most of them want to talk about HIV, but they don't know where to start. Sometimes it's not easy. I know that probably in the pulpit, just to bring it up, HIV, they won't. But I've been invited to churches where I'll talk about my own lived experience. Nobody would say anything, but after that, 3, 4 people come to you and say, oh, I know my brother this or my sister this. So we know that the church needs this information, but sometimes they don't know where to start because they don't know sometimes how the congregation probably might receive the information. I'm not a preacher, so I'm just talking. But, but that's something that as we collaborate, we can help to break that ice, to break that so that the conversation can start. One of the things that we are doing too is to talk to the first ladies. I think people, look up to the first ladies as their elders, even if they might not be older than them, but they are elders in the church. So if you give that information to the first ladies, then they can bring the information to their congregation. So when we have all those tea or some cookouts at the church, just invite somebody with lived experience because you never know, you might save somebody. Because you know what, in the 90s, we were talking about people dying every day. We were going to work, looking at who died this week, who died last night. But that's not what we are talking now. Now we are talking about living. So now the message should be people living with HIV are living. Let's see how we're going to live healthy. That's all I had to say. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody. Thank these panelists for their contribution to this event. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. We are going to break for lunch, and as a result of us breaking for lunch, we're going to pick back up at 1 o'clock. We'll be having the conversation around why does it matter? Theological justice matters. Thank you, everybody. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot to tell y'all. Lunch is in the back. Panera Bread provided. Viva sponsored this. It's Sloshies? Okay, Sloshies. Sorry. There's Sloshies in the back. And is she going to come talk? Okay. All right. All right, get your lunch, and then we'll have a little conversation while we're eating. Thank you.